morning, everyone. It's really an honor to be here today, really an honor to be included in this event, and it's great to see the patient side of the equation so prominently part of your agenda today. As Terry said, today we're going to be hearing about challenges and innovative thinking required to transform our healthcare system from its current acute care approach, or largely acute care approach, to a more patient-centered and efficient system. I believe that striking a balance between growing costs and growing demand is only possible through your courageous and strategic leadership and through renewed policies and renewed programs. We all know that too many of our health funding decisions are driven by politics and public opinion. And as a nation, I think that it's time that we build a healthcare system that is based upon concrete medical evidence and patient experience. Here's some concrete evidence for us all to consider today. 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness in his or her lifetime. Anxiety and depression are among the top 5 reasons for visits to the doctor. Mental illness is the second most prevalent cause of disability and premature death. Mental illness is costing our nation $51 billion a year in health care and low productivity costs. And the World Health Organization tells us that globally, by 2020, depression will be the single biggest medical burden. 2020 isn't very far away. Are we ready for that burden? Suffering from mental illness is a daily struggle. And it is comparable to saying that you have a contagious disease, one that's harmful, scornful, misunderstood, and filled with myth and shame. This morning, I'm going to introduce you to a woman who went from being a recognized leader in her community and our nation to being ashamed to even say her name aloud because of the stigma of mental illness. From a very young age, this woman was a thriving, productive member of society. She was a recognized motivational speaker. She was actually a representative for Canadian youth during the repatriation of the Constitution. She was a Canadian national team athlete in 3 sports. She was a Woman of Distinction Award winner. She was an Ironman competitor. She was a valedictorian, a Queen's University student leader, a coach, and a mother to a beautiful daughter. However, in our society where escapism is more important than truth, she presented a perfect outward self to the world while her inner self was in crisis. In the midst of her personal chaos, she kept her pain and secrets hidden so far below the surface that it was a shock to friends when her burden revealed itself through several suicide attempts. The cost to our community has not only been extensive medical costs, but also the social cost of losing one of its most productive leaders for over a decade. Martin Luther King said, "Our life begins to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." Today, I've chosen to break that silence about this woman's story because she is me. And I hope that by sharing my experience, as I do several occasions to many groups, diverse backgrounds, diverse futures, I hope that by sharing my story, I can generate the open discussion and constructive action that's necessary to acknowledge the medical evidence that points to the necessity to integrate mental health and mental health care into all elements of our healthcare continuum. Sadly, many of us in this room have hidden fears, regrets, traumas, and pain that create a burden on our souls and challenge our mental and physical health. Walrus magazine, in fact, just this month, tells us that mental illness is the new normal. But the patient experience with our existing healthcare system does not align with that new normal or with the medical evidence. I personally developed post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of trauma from domestic violence. I grew up in a family that was scarred by alcoholism and violence, but we lived in absolute silence about the horror that happened behind the walls of our beautiful suburban home. Not surprisingly, as an adult, once again I found myself living in silence and again living in an abusive family. I was suffering at the hands of my partner. My fear of shame about being abused held me captive for over 10 years, and I entered a very dark period of my life. I was not dead, but I really wasn't alive either. The physical and mental discipline that I had developed as an elite athlete and academic no longer protected me from the recurring flashbacks and nightmares, and it began to haunt me and re-traumatize me. Despite the police alarm I wore 24/7, I became hyper-vigilant, always looking over my shoulder, distrusting people, fearing everyone and everything. I startled, screamed, jumped. I lived in hiding for 2 years under that police protection. My life ended. My public life ended. My career ended. I lost my home. My daughter and I lived in fear. My partner found us everywhere we were hidden. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. And I decided that life was over. So I tried to end it at my own hands. Thankfully, I didn't succeed. And I became very thankful that I'd had the opportunity to go through that experience and to experience the hospital care that I received. Shortly after that dark period, I began to develop seizures, grand mal seizures, and I required significant neurological care and significant neurological exploration by a number of neurologists. Unfortunately, because of my psychiatric past, it colored the way I was treated. Every time I arrived at a merge, a security guard was placed at the end of my bed. Now, someone with PTSD, someone who'd had seizures, was not conscious during roughly an hour, and awoke to a security guard at the end of their bed. Very re-traumatizing, let me just say that. Furthermore, one of the neurologists who was of my primary care was pretty certain that I was making up my seizures just to get attention. It was only after my partner was able to provide him with video evidence that they were in fact real that he was believing that this was not a psychiatric incident, this was in fact a physical problem. I share my personal experience with you today in the hope that no other patient has to experience those very embarrassing judgments that definitely colored the way I was treated medically and psychiatrically. The unfortunate thing with my experience is that my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, was also abused. And we recently experienced a hospital visit that is what's really driving me to get out and advocate on behalf of patients. I received a telephone call while I was at work on September 24th from my daughter's high school. She was missing. She had written a suicide note on the bathroom wall. It covered the entire wall. Arrived to the school, police were sent out looking for her. We finally found her late in the day. She was taken to the Children's Hospital, where she was monitored, guarded by police because she was taken there against her will. We were interviewed by a social worker in the psychiatric emergency unit. Now, my daughter is a classic abuse victim. She cuts. Her entire body was covered in cuts. Self-injury. She's anorexic. She's 6 feet tall and weighs 100 pounds. She took very, very potent drugs that day. Cocaine, ketamine, that's a horse tranquilizer in case you don't know. A 40-ouncer of Jack Daniels, and several other indescribable chemicals. She wanted to die. She was in trouble with the police for very aggressive behavior. All of this classic pain. The social worker that day said none of those things were mental health issues, and that my daughter was trying to get attention. Really. And furthermore, I was informed that I needed to stop being the parachute that softened my daughter's landing. I should let her crash. I guess death would be crash in this case, because I don't know how much further down a 17-year-old should be allowed to fall. We were not allowed to see the psychiatrist until the final report was written, and it was a discharge. One of the police officers guarding my daughter that day cried because he said, I do this every day, and every day the same things happen. So the reality is we don't have the beds, we don't have the money. We are out there telling our community, as we will on February 12th during the Bell Let's Talk Day, get out and tell everyone about your mental illness. Get out and talk about it. But we don't have the infrastructure, and our healthcare continuum does not support proactive, preventative care for the people who do need it, the largest part of our population who needs that care. So I'm hoping that today, my experience you will consider as one of many experiences that are happening in every hospital across the country, every doctor's office, every school, every office. We all know that it's the #1 cost for disability at in the workplace, and a huge loss of productivity in our country. I'm hoping that today, by the end of the day, and throughout the day, I'm going to hear lots of innovative ideas about how you're going to integrate mental health into our national healthcare strategy, into the way we prevent our society from spending all that money on healthcare, when it's really quite simple. We need to stop duplicating services. We need to train our doctors to be better at reading their patients. At Harvard, they're taking their doctors to art galleries so that they're better at observing. We need to look at healthcare in from a very different perspective. And we need to stop building silos of prioritization and discriminating against those who have mental health issues. Largely, I believe, not because we don't care, but because we don't have the answers and we're afraid to admit that. So at the end of today, I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas, and I'm very, very open to coming and working with you. I'm working with CHIO in Ottawa. Alex Munter, the fantastic CEO there, has invited me to work with his psychiatric unit. I'm working with the police to help them in their youth services. I'm working with the Trillium Foundation to develop abuse screening tools for Ottawa hospitals. And I'm working with the media to get the word out that we need money and we need to pay attention to the largest burden in our society today. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.